Hi, everyone.
Hi, Christine.
Hi.
Milda, hi. Great. Oh, well, Ernest, you are here too.
Hi, okay, sorry.
Hi.
Christine.
Hi.
Milda, hi. Oh, wow, this is the recording already. Carsten. Carsten?
Hello.
Hi.
Everyone.
I just need technical help from Carsten, so I will speak in German for a second. Du musst mir gleich nur sagen, mit dem Bildschirm freigeben, ne, bei Zoom. Das hab ich noch nie gemacht. Ich kenne ja nur Teams.
Das ist relativ easy, wenn du in das Menü gehst, wo auch Stummschalten und so weiter zu sehen ist.
Ja.
Da gibt es so ein kleines Icon, das heißt Inhalt teilen. Das ist bei mir in grün auf dem Tablet. Das ist wahrscheinlich...
Ach so, ich habe Bildschirm freigeben, steht bei mir.
Ja, das ist das, genau. Das heißt hier wahrscheinlich ein bisschen anders auf dem Tablet.
Ah, ja.
Genau, und wenn du da draufklickst, dann wirst du eine Auswahl an Bildschirmen sehen, die du freigeben kannst. Entweder eine einzelne App oder den gesamten Bildschirm.
Ja.
Und dann musst du eigentlich nur noch die Präsi anklicken, die du zeigen möchtest.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Also, und beenden machst du dann ähnlich zum Schluss.
Ja. Okay, super. Danke. Vielleicht gucken wir, hilfst du mir, falls ich nicht vorankomme.
Ja, ich sag dir Bescheid, wenn es klappt oder wenn es nicht klappt.
Super. Großartig. Katharina, do you say something for...
Yeah, well, hi, officially welcome everyone. Sorry, it was a bit of a mess in the beginning. I had to technically set up the live YouTube stream. I just shared the link here if you want to share it further. Right, so I think we need to wait a little bit more so Thomas also joins.
Okay, so maybe I try to share my screen. That everything works when we need it, so I give it a try. Okay. Vorschau presentation. So what shall I do, Carsten? Using desktop, clicking desktop 1 or?
Kannst du ein Preview sehen? Das sind dann, also...
Ich sehe jetzt hier Desktop 1. Soll ich mal freigeben?
Genau, jetzt sehen wir komplett deinen gesamten Desktop.
Ah ja, okay.
Du könntest, glaube ich, auch direkt nur eine bestimmte Applikation freigeben, aber das ist
so, und siehst du jetzt meine Präsentation?
Wir sehen jetzt deine Präsi auf jeden Fall. Ja.
Ah ja, und wenn ich jetzt klickt die weiter?
Ja.
Ja, was siehst du jetzt ein Plakat?
Ich sehe jetzt ein Plakat.
Ah ja, super, dann haben wir es ja.
Genau, also wenn du das jetzt noch auf Vollbild machst, dann würde das wahrscheinlich, also auf den grünen kleinen Runden ganz links oben, klick da mal drauf.
Auf den hier?
Ganz links, also bei dir wahrscheinlich rechts, ne, links. Oh, du hast doch hier roten, gelben und einen grünen Bubble. Ja. Und wenn du auf den grünen klickst, dann machst du das auf Vollbild. Und dann sehen wir das halt auch, genau, so ist perfekt.
Okay, super.
Jetzt kannst du, glaube ich, auch mit den Tasten navigieren, genau.
Ja, ja. Und siehst du jetzt wieder das Plakat praktisch?
Genau, ja.
Ah, ja.
Vollbild. Super.
Okay, großartig. Super. Okay, then I'm ready.
Awesomeness.
Okay, Katharina, you just give the go, right? So we wait a little bit.
Yes, I am wondering if Thomas will be joining us.
Maybe he thinks it starts at 5:30 or something like that. I don't know.
Let's say we wait just one more minute, 5 minutes, and then we begin.
Okay.
In the meantime, I wanted to remind everyone to mute the microphones, but everybody already knows this. I see. I could use this occasion to let you know that we are preparing a special mailing list for people who are interested in the chemical organization theory and music. So it would be great if you want to keep in the loop with the events, but also with the research and the links we are sharing, the materials, before we set up a platform or a website for the entire project. We'll communicate probably over the email. So if you would like to be on this list, please send me your email in a private message here, and I will collect them by the end.
And Thomas has joined.
Yes, I see. Okay, great.
Great.
I see Natalie is here and he's, hey guys. Okay, yeah. The floor is yours, Christian.
Okay, thank you, Katharina. Yes, first of all, thank you for the invitation to give this presentation today on chemical organization theory and music. And I thought it might be good if I pick up where we left the last time. And so I want to talk about two things today. I want to give you an idea about my work because the concept of my work will be the point of departure for the seminar I have planned for our research project here. And second, I want to give you an idea about our explorations and experiments with COT in the last semester. Yes, and I hope I get together what I want to say to you today. And so as a start, once again, my name is Christian Jendreiko. I am professor for digital communication at the Peter Behrens School of Arts in Düsseldorf, and the Peter Behrens School of Arts is part of the University for Applied Sciences here in Düsseldorf. And I would describe myself as an art science hybrid. And this state of being is reflected in the title of this exhibition of mine, which took place in 2019 at the Volkswagen Museum in Essen. The exhibition was called Lust und Rätsel, two words. The English translation is reverse, riddle and lust. And to me, the word riddle reflects the scientific part of my work, and the word lust reflects the artistic part of my work. So within this title, both things are reflected. I am an art science hybrid. Why? Well, I did study sciences, media science, and fundamental theology. But the reason why I did study sciences is my artistic practice. My work is characterized by long-term collaborations. The two longest collaborations are these two. There's the artist group Hobby Pop Museum. We started to work together in 1998. And this is the other collaborator I work now for a very long time together with. It's Stefan Werni. And the two of us, we met at school, actually, within an interdisciplinary project. And so I really, from my early days on, I'm a big fan of interdisciplinary projects, because this is when everything took off for me. Okay, so my artistic background is originally music. And here comes my definition of music. I understand music as free interplay between people playing with musical instruments. And please note that for my own work, I reject the term of music. We did talk already about this in our first meeting, Katharina, when you remember, and you gave this great quote of Merleau-Ponty. And working together with Hobby Pop Museum, I enhanced this definition of mine from music. I generalized it to art. And so art to me is a free interplay between people using instruments, which are not necessarily musical instruments. Let me see what is next. Okay, this is, okay, so I go back to Stefan and me. So you see here a poster of one of our events. Stefan and I, since 1985, when we started out to work together, we did experiment with all forms of improvisation. So we did jazz, we did free jazz, and finally, free improvisation with concepts and devices of electronic music, as you can see here. And during the years, you can imagine, we did play hundreds of sessions of free improvisation. And I had the impression very early on, when you perform what is called free improvisation, you might think it is free. But in reality, free improvisation is not free, but ruled by what I call hidden patterns of behavior. And these patterns rule the creative process without being recognized by the improvisers. And out of this experience, over the years, 3 questions did arise. And they are my leading questions until today. So the first question is, what are the hidden patterns of my behavior that I can't see when I am within a creative process in which I try to solve an aesthetic problem? And second, how do these patterns come about? In other words, what are the laws and forces that are at play within a given situation that give shape to these patterns? And third, what can I do to become aware of these hidden patterns in order to gain control over them and in order to change them if I want to? So these 3 questions are also leading questions of my current research project, which is called Artificial Intuition. And some of you might remember that I had the opportunity to talk about this project in 2019 at CLEA on invitation by Katharina Petrovic. Okay, so the source of my scientific research is my artistic practice. And my artistic practice, in return, is a method for my scientific research. So here you have the boundary of art and science. Okay, let's have a closer look at my artistic practice. My artistic work is not so much artifact-centered, it is performance-based. And it is based on concepts and ideas of generative aesthetics. And the concept of generative aesthetics was developed in the 50s and 60s in Germany, in Stuttgart, around the philosopher Max Bense, and in Bonn and Cologne around Werner Meyer-Eppler. He was professor for information theory in Bonn. And one of the important places for experimentation with these concepts was the Studio for Electronic Music at the radio station of WDR in Cologne. So some of you might know maybe Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, the composer. So this is, so he did experiment a lot with these ideas of generative aesthetics. Okay, what is a generative aesthetic, or as I call it, a generative system? You can say that a generative aesthetic is a set of 4 basic factors. You have first the repertoire, which is the stuff, you can say, or the set of elements the system works on. You have the task. This could be, for example, combining the elements to reach a certain goal. You have third, the constraints. This could be, for example, a list which combinations of elements are not allowed. And you have a working unit. And the working unit works out a solution for the task, which means the working unit generates an algorithm to fulfill the task. The working unit can be a computer system. And this is the classic generative aesthetic concept as it was developed in Stuttgart. But from my point of view, it can also be a group of people. So for example, a music ensemble. And therefore, or a group of artists. And therefore, a generative system can be described in the form of a program, if it is a computer system, or in form of written instructions, if the working unit is a group of people. And now, what I did add to this concept is the dimension of artistic research, in the sense that the working unit not only generates a solution for the task, but it observes itself doing so, trying to investigate how it works and trying to work out a solution, which means an algorithm. The idea of my work is to bring on a reflexive, generative, artistic practice. And the purpose of this practice is to discover the hidden patterns of behavior that rule the creative process, to become aware of these hidden patterns and to get hold of them in order to change them if I want to. This reflexive artistic practice requires to develop methods of self-observation and methods of formalization. And here lies my deep interest in applying COT. And Francis, when I was in Brussels in 2019, gave me the hint to give it a try with COT. Okay, why formalization? I understand formalization of a creative process as an emancipation machine. If I am able to formalize my hidden patterns of behavior, it liberates me from repeating these patterns over and over again. Trying to automatize my own creative behavior, which means trying to translate it into an algorithm, liberates me from this automatism. And this is an idea which was originally formulated by Viktor Shklovsky. So to get rid of automatization, try automatization. I show you some of my works. So this is maybe the most well-known, God's White Noise. It's an action for players, guitars, and amplifiers. And one of the characteristics of my performances is that they are long duration performances. So God's White Noise does last 7 hours, but it's not about doing a marathon, but it's really about trying to accomplish the mission that is set via a written instruction by coming up with an algorithm, more or less, and observing yourself doing so. So this was one of these performances in San Francisco, and I started to experiment too with different time scales of these performances. So I did it 7 hours, but I also did it 24 hours. Just to give you an impression, I put together some photos. This was God's White Noise in Duesseldorf at the Kunstverein. This was in Birmingham. This was yes, also 7 hours, but the year later we did a 24-hour session. This is in Los Angeles, so it's basically that you have these written instructions and the performers are following these instructions. This is another exhibition, which was an exhibition of Mary Bauermeister and me at the Kunstmuseum in Solingen. And here you see a more electronic approach for a performance of mine. This was at the museum in Mönchengladbach, where you see, this was a 24-hour performance actually, and you see 2 rooms, and in the one room there was a projection of an older performance, and the people with the new performance you see on the right, they had the opportunity to react to the older performance in the other space. And this was at the Folkwang Museum, a performance. And you see, talking about self-observation, it is really a central point of these performances that, so that the people, that we really discuss our findings while we are doing these performances. And it's also interdisciplinary in the sense that I invite different people as performers. So here you see a group of people which consists of 2 philosophers, Michael Hirsch and Michael Anacker. You see composers, musical composers like Martin Phelps. You see musicians. You see an artist, Carla Milosevic, and you see me. And so this is really the way it works. So you have these instructions, and you try to generate a solution, and you observe yourself while you are trying to generate this solution, to find out what are the patterns, the hidden patterns that rule your way dealing with this situation. Okay. Why do I tell you all this? Well, I think our task within our project here, as far as I understand it, is to create a sonic model of an autopoietic system. And I want you to know what my approach is, because I thought that this performance-based, reflexive, generative approach of artistic practice will be the conceptual basis for the seminar where we will try in Düsseldorf to develop solutions for the task that Francis has described in his email. And so the challenge of the task, as to me, are these following 4 points. So the challenge to design a sonic model of an autopoietic system, to me, means first, understanding the key features of an autopoietic self-organizing system as it is, second, understood at CLEA, in order to, third, generate an autopoietic system in form of a sound-producing system that makes, fourth, its autopoietic character transparent to the listener of its sound. So this would be my basic concept, which we can discuss. Okay. In order to find solutions for this challenge, I need some answers to the following questions. And not today, but in the course of our project. And the basic question I have, is a generative system, the way I did describe it right now to you, is this a self-organizing system? This is my basic question, because if yes, then I think there is a way to represent an autopoietic system in form of a generative sound system the way I did describe it. So what I need is a clear understanding of what you have on your mind when you are talking at clear about the character of an autopoietic system. Because my rough idea for the seminar in Düsseldorf is to develop concepts how a group of people with musical instruments could enact as an autopoietic system. And this leads to another question of mine. So do they enact an autopoietic system in the sense that they illustrate an autopoietic system, but they are not actually an autopoietic system? Or are they, as a group, as a generative group, an autopoietic system? So these questions are super important to me. Thinking about these questions, I did draw some sketches. Two of these I will show to you. This one is inspired by the diagram Thomas showed the last time. And so we have these two systems and they are bound. So this is the open system, the group of people. And so the input here might be ideas, the task, the written instructions, and the whole situation. And this generates within the reaction network a transformation or enhancement of the input in terms of emulation, translation, or opposition, etc. And this produces a certain kind of behavior, and this behavior determines the sound, which is then the output of the system. So this is just a rough sketch to get a little bit more clear about the task we are talking about. And another question for me is the question that the whole process, when we are talking about self-organizing systems as systems that are within a steady state, are we talking about circular systems which stay in a steady state, which have the Fließgleichgewicht, to use a German term, or is it a spiral process, which means that the open system tends towards higher levels of organization? So these two questions are basic questions to me. Okay, this is part one, and now I will move on to part two, to COT, trying to experiment with COT as a generative tool, what we did this summer semester here in Düsseldorf. So it well, I said that Francis introduced me to COT in Brussels, and Francis did send me papers about COT, and then he connected me with Thomas, and you can see Thomas right here. And for this whole thing, I'm really absolutely thankful, because I had the impression after reading the papers Francis did send me in 2019, that COT could be not only an excellent tool to analyze and formalize the creative design process, but that it also might have potential to be used as a generative tool. And so I had the opportunity to invite Thomas to Düsseldorf because we wanted to learn how COT works. And Thomas gave us a great introduction to COT. And you also see here Carsten. You know Carsten already. He is a lecturer within the research project of artificial intuition. And you also know already Markus Wetzler, a good friend of mine, communication designer. he made it possible that, so he made the contact to Katarina Petrovich, which led to the invitation and at the end led to the lecture or to the presentation I give today, right now to you. And Marcus starts doing research on COT using for describing digital leadership. So this is also a very interesting thing that is going on. And so we all met in Düsseldorf last year in January 2020. And when Thomas introduced us to COT, right there, he said to me, the task of modeling a process with COT is to start a narrative of the interaction between the species that are interacting within a reaction network. And thinking about this notion, I asked myself, when I want to learn how COT works, and when I want to explore its potential as a generative tool, why not trying it the other way around? Why not trying to model a narrative with COT? And so this led to the experiment that we did in the summer semester. We did start to experiment with the modeling of origin myths. So now why origin myths? Well, since every origin myth is a tale of creation, what is described in an origin myth is a creative process. And a process can be described within COT as a set of reactions. So this was my idea. And to try out how this might work, I did choose 2 origin myths for our experimentation. One myth was the origin of the Pequot tribe. This myth is part of a collection of origin myths of North American natives. And the other myth is the origin of sin as it could be found in the Bible in Genesis chapter 1.3. So we start to analyze these 2 origin myths with COT. And during the process, we did find out, besides the explicit process that is told in the myths, you start to detect a myriad of implicit processes that you can decode or maybe construct, including the process that you yourself are part of by analyzing the myth. And of course, what you decode depends on the conceptual frame you are looking through while you decode the text. Okay, this is the table when Thomas was there introducing us to COT. And this is one of our findings. We had analyzing Genesis 1.3. So this was a very interesting interpretation, which I want to present to you as an example how we did proceed. So here we did identify 4 basic reactions, reaction 1, 2, 3, and 4. So Eva and the snake and the conversation leads to Eva sees the apple with different eyes. So you all know this story. Reaction 2 is Eva and Adam, and conversation leads to that Adam sees the prohibition of eating the apple with different eyes. And reaction 3 is that Eva and the apple and eating it makes Eva sees that she is naked, and the same goes for Adam. And reaction 4 is that Adam and God after this and their conversation leads to that God discovers the break of law. Now, if you generalize these reactions, you can say that reaction number 1 is man and animal and interaction leads to change of consciousness of man. Reaction 2 is that man and interaction leads to change of consciousness, man. Reaction 3 is that man and vegetable and interaction leads to change of consciousness of man. And reaction 4 is that man and supernatural power, or let's call it Superman, and interaction leads to change of consciousness of the supernatural power. So I think the application of COT as an analytical tool reveals here a very interesting reaction network. And I ask myself, do we observe here maybe the description of an archetype of a self-organizing system? Because what we observe is this: we have distributed consciousness in form of different actors. And this consciousness is distributed between man, animal, and Superman. And we observe interactions on different levels between these actors. And each actor we can understand as a knot within a reaction network that could be called, let's say, the system of Eden. And even the supernatural power is, I would say, part of this reaction network. So I was thinking if the supernatural power is both. It is inside the system, and at the same time, it is outside the system. So you have here an interesting relationship between first-order cybernetics and second-order cybernetics, I assume. And we can observe that these interactions increase the level of organization, because the result of these interactions is a higher level of consciousness of the system as a whole. So every actor which we can look at as a knot within the lattice of the system knows more after these interactions than before. So this system of Eden seems to be a learning system. And as far as I did understand self-organizing systems, they are learning systems. Yes. And of course, what we did analyze here is just scratching the surface. For example, the actors of all these 4 reactions are just, of course, names for subsets. And all this could be worked out in more detail. But my aim was within this seminar to focus on basic principles. Okay, so this is the analytical side of COT, how we did use it. I don't know what comes now. Yeah. But we also experimented with turning COT from an analytical tool into a generative tool. And what we did find out here is it seems that every storyline that is told within a story could be interpreted as a set of reactions. Yes, but that means in reverse. Let me go back so that you see this. But that means in reverse, if I identify the components of a storyline as actors within a reaction and encode them within the notation system of COT, plus if I understand the components, so with components I mean these things here, if I understand these components of each reaction as parameters, I can generate out of this structure a multitude of variations by mapping different values to each parameter. So, okay, if I take this as a parameter, And this as an element of a solution set for these parameters, for a value set, an element of the value set for these parameters, I really can start to turn this analytical thing into a generative thing. So really at this point, COT turns from an analytical into a generative tool and fulfills the notion of Abraham A. Mohl's that every analytical system can be used as a generative system. And this notion is essential to me in the discourse between art and science. And Abraham A. Mohl's also belong to the set of people in Stuttgart in the 50s and 60s who were setting up this idea of generative aesthetics. Okay, so this was the way we went. And now how we did proceed to turn now the analytical part of COT into a generative part. Well, we did use logic programming. And the key to logic programming for me is Alfred Tarski's notion that P does exist if Q does exist. So the original notion is P is true if Q is true. So, you know, all this logic implication, but you can also translate it, or I do it, P does exist if Q does exist. And now my idea was you can turn a reaction network into a generative system using this notion as basic programming principle. And that is what we did. Okay, so what did we do working on basic principles? We took this reaction, just reaction number one, and tried to turn this structure into this analytical structure into a generative structure, reaction one. And we did it writing this computer program which is a logic program. And you see now here that reaction number one, so you have here the structure. I go back, you have exactly this structure, man and animal and interaction leads to change of consciousness. And you have exactly the same thing here. Reaction number one does exist when there is a man and an animal and an interaction and a certain result. Okay, and now if I understand these components of a reaction network as parameters, I can start to set up sets of solutions, of values for these single parameters, which we did here. Just very small program, just to make clear basic principles. So this is why I call this the parameter sequence, and here you have the parameter values. And of course, and now I show you three outputs of this. And what is happening now? So if I now start the program, then within logic program you have a implemented algorithm, which is a simple deep search algorithm. And this deep search algorithm leads to all possible combinations that that you bring on when you put down here these parameter values. Okay, now maybe you sense structural similarities between this program and my artistic work. And if yes, you are right, because this program that you see here is also a generative system in the classic sense I did present in the first part of this presentation. So you have, you you have the set of elements that you are working on. You have the task to generate this reaction. You have the constraints. The constraints are that there are just these parameter values and nothing else. You have the constraint, and you have the working unit, which is the deep search algorithm of logic programming. And if you look at this system as a man-machine system, with me interacting with the program I have written, it might even be a it is a self-observing system. Okay, so of course, what the program does then is that it, as an output, it generates all possible combinations. So it's Eva and the snake and talk leads to wonder. Eva and snake and talk leads to wisdom. Eva, snake and talk leads to madness. So so you get all these combinations as an output, and this is classic generative aesthetic as it was developed in Stuttgart. Okay, where can we take COT from here? My plan is to integrate the generative potential of COT into the design of a sonic model of an autopoietic system. How? I don't know yet. Carsten and I, we have some ideas, but they are blurry at the moment. But I want definitely to try to use this side of COT as a part of the sonic modeling. And exploring COT this way and trying to learn how it works, some questions did arise, and some are very detailed, and I hope that we can discuss them with Thomas in the nearer future. But my basic question I want to share with you now is this one. The way we did deal with COT in our seminar, is it okay? Does it make sense? Does it make sense in the sense that are we precise enough in using the language COT? Thomas, you said COT is an open language, and everything can be everything can be translated into reaction chains. And so this is really the question: is this way we walked in the summer semester, is this okay? And how far can we take it? How far can we move away from the concept of chemical reactions without becoming random or pointless or senseless? And the last aspect of this question is the autopoietic system just another structure that can be described with COT, or is it somehow also at the core of the structure of COT? So this is another question, a basic question of mine. Yes, and this is it so far, and thank you for your attention so far. And yes, and I'm happy that I could show this to you, and I'm happy if we can find answers to my questions, or if you have remarks. Yes, okay, thank you.
Maybe Christian, you could stop the shared screen.
Wait, let me check how to do it.
Das geht auch, wo du das gerade auch eingeschaltet hast.
Ah ja, warte mal.
Das ist dasselbe Icon.
Sie befinden sich in der gemeinsamen Bildschirm. Warte mal, ist das dann stoppen?
Ja.
Ah, okay, super. Okay.
Great. Dan, you raised your hand. Maybe that was a...
I see now that I had put not my micro. Is it working now?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Very interesting. Of course, a question about the beginning of your talk. If you, I see, of course, that's the way to be very, very general. And you say hidden patterns. And what about not hidden patterns? Is it possible? Is it allowed to bring in not hidden patterns?
Yes, yes, definitely. It's yes, of course. So this is, when you are in a creative process, of course, patterns that you work with, and of course, you bring them into the process. But I'm keen on finding out what are the hidden patterns, so that you maybe could gain control over them too. So this is the idea. But definitely, yes, known patterns, of course.
And do you make a big distinction about consciousness patterns that you bring in, or patterns that are revealed afterwards, or?
Yes, exactly. So during this work of self-observation, the hope is, and sometimes it works, that you detect patterns or forces or laws that are at play, and that direct the way you are working, and you get hold of it. You get a hold of them, and this is the interesting part. This is one of the ideas why the research project in which all this is happening, and which I had the opportunity to present in 2019 at CLEA, is I did call artificial intuition, because I think that a lot of hidden patterns that are at work we describe as intuition, and I wonder if we could find out how our intuition works. So this is the idea.
Yeah, definitely. So let's say that, and of course the hidden and not hidden is also connected to what you could call outside and inside, but they are not overlapping, I suppose. Also not
hidden. Wait, this I have to write it down. You said hidden and not hidden, and
yeah, there is also, you could say, the outside and the inside of the system.
in how far?
Or do you don't consider any outside? Everything is inside. Suppose
No.
you're on a building and the fire alarm goes.
Yeah.
Would that be outside?
Yeah. When you might remember the sketch I showed to you, there are two systems, right? The input one, the bounded. So I look at it as bounded systems, the way Thomas did present it. And I use the notion of situation in which I am in. And so this is the outside, which has impact on me.
Yeah, but if the fire alarm goes and you have to leave the building, for example, you can't repeat that, I think. You can have that in Duesseldorf, but you cannot repeat it in New York.
I didn't get it.
Suppose you're doing a performance and the fire alarm goes and you have to leave the building. Huh?
Yeah.
And it happens in Duesseldorf.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot repeat it somewhere else.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
So I would say that's a good definition of outside, at least.
Okay. I get it. Yes. So it's the spontaneous moments, or or it's chance actually, right?
No, I mean more the things you cannot control, even not hidden. They are not even hidden, but they come from the outside.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This is what I call situation.
Mm-hmm. In the search for reality, in realistic approaches, I've worked a long time. So my questions are a little bit colored by that, I think. But I've worked a long time in general formalisms that try to make a distinction between what is reality and what is the system, what is the outside of the system.
Yeah.
And that's one of the notions. Myself, I'm very interested to see how far COT can go in that. But I don't know enough yet of how you can apply it, where the limitations will show up, or whether it's very general that you can also really define what reality is, what the out. So that is. So I was wondering just whether you thought about this very concrete thing, if the fire alarm goes, whether you classify it.
Yeah, it's yes. So okay, yes, this is what I call situation, and you are within a situation, and of course the forces that are at play within a situation change all the time, and of course I can't have control over these forces. The question is, can I gain more control about about adapting or dealing with these things that happen? So can I work on my awareness within a situation that this actual force is now playing on me? This, you know what I mean? This is.
Yeah.
And this is one of the questions, and I think you can only. I don't know if it's possible, but empirically, I can say doing all this improvisation stuff now since 1985, that you can shape your awareness of what is going on within a situation. Not in total. So it's not about totalitarian thinking or total control or something like that. This is not the point. It's more like how good can I shape this awareness, that I really can sense that this force at the moment is playing on me, and do I want it? Can I use it? Can I enhance it somewhere or not? So this is the idea.
But still, this is an attempt of the system to cope with the outside, I know.
Yes.
Since the system is not the whole world, I suppose.
Yes. But on the other side, it depends on where you put the boundaries of the system. So if you say I'm a not within a bigger network. So what I was thinking about, about distributed consciousness or something like that. You know, like the approach of Gotthard Günther, for example. It's complicated, and for me it's complicated too to get into this way of thinking. But well, I don't know yet. It's a kind of an experience, kind of an experiment to see or to try out what happens when I start to do aesthetic improvisation within a group, when I understand myself as part of the situation, or if I understand myself as a system which is distinct from other systems, you know. So this kind of changing the conceptual framework through which I try to understand the situation. This is one of the interesting points to me.
Yeah, there is a lot of evidence that a lot of complexity comes in by just the fact that we always have to consider a system that is not the whole, that is also a part. Could even be that indeterminisms come in by that reason. It's not certain, but let's say that. I don't know, Francis. How do they see that in general system theory? Well, I see that Francis is there.
Francis, you're muted.
Yes, I'm there, but I didn't quite get the question.
Well, I was wondering, in fact, it's one of my attention points. I don't want to put it always on the forefront, by the way, but I listened carefully to what people do with this COT. I was wondering in which way you can grasp a kind of definition of what is real and what is not real.
I don't think that COT will answer any questions about that. I think COT is a modeling language, which means any language is for modeling, and modeling is always a simplified representation of something which you assume to be a reality, but the reality itself is outside of the modeling. So some models are better, of course, if they make more reliable predictions, but in COT is just a language. So it's not, you can't say that the language is better than another language. It depends on what you express in that language. If you express a model that is very precise, then you can say, okay, that model has captured essential aspects of reality, but you can also express a purely imaginary model in there that has nothing whatsoever to do with reality. So I don't think that COT has any claims about being more or less real than other.
No, it's not so much.
Languages.
It's not so much that what I want to say, but let's say that one of the big problems from the start is that whatever you do, whether you do physics, whether you do psychology, whatever science you apply, in arts it's less well defined. So that's why I posed the question here. You always have something which you consider the outside, and you don't bother too much about it. You want to limit its influence as much as possible. You want to isolate the system. You do all kind of things to not be bothered by the fire alarm for example, if you have a performance. If it then happens, of course, so the question is very concrete. What do we do with the outside? Since you always talk about a system that is not everything, I suppose.
Well, what COT, I think, illuminates a lot is the notion of autopoiesis, and autopoiesis was originally defined by Maturana and Varela to be a description of how systems close themselves off from the outside. An organization in COT is a system that is self-sufficient. It's self-maintaining. That means that it has everything to keep itself going, and it doesn't really care about the outside.
Yeah, but that's what I mean.
What we are doing in our Templeton project is to extend that by looking at what we call resilience of the system. That means the system can self-maintain, but can it still self-maintain if you perturb it? That means if the outside intrudes in the system, will the system still be an organization? Can it maintain its autopoiesis? And our hypotheses are that only certain types of organizations will be able to do that. And these certain types of organizations, they need to have some kind of a sensing of the outside world. So they will probably develop some kind of a cognition of the outside world. So that's kind of our working hypothesis, that to have an organization that really can survive in a wide range of circumstances, it will need to become more and more aware of what's going on outside.
Yeah, but this is super interesting in terms of arts, because if you think about a classical concert, for example, it is what Diederik said, that you try to isolate the system from the outside. For example, that you don't hear the train which passes by.
Yeah, for example, yeah.
Yes, and and this is exactly what interests me. What if you have a concept of art where you take this in, where you say that the perturbation is I deal with it. So first of all, I have to recognize it, of course, that this is a perturbation. So I have to have a connection to the outside, and then I have to. And then the question is, how do I take it in? And at what point the artistic system is destroyed, and from what point on not? This is super interesting. So, for example, I showed you the photo of God's White Noise, the performance in Duesseldorf. So this was the second time I did it at the Kunstverein in Duesseldorf. It was the open night of the museums, and the alcohol level during this night really raises up. And so the question was, would this performance, would it be resilient to the outside perturbations? And the crazy thing was, so the director of the Kunstverein asked me if I want to have what is it called, the people who watch that nothing is happening, security. So they asked me, do you want to have security? And I said, yes, let's have security. But I felt bad about having security because I had all these things going on with exactly what we are talking about right now. But the magic thing was that the people who came into the space where it was happening, they really cooled down. And they adapted to so the outside adapted to what was going on. And I don't know, and this was one of these moments where exactly that happened, what we are talking about. And this is what I try to find out, or this is one of the aspects I try to find out, but I don't. So, and this is what I mean with shaping the awareness, because you really have to think about, why did this happen? So what were that this perturbation didn't destroy the actual performance?
Yeah, indeed. But that's what I meant to ask. I think it's a good clue to start to look for autopoiesis, to see what the outside world does. You see, there's a funny video you can see on the web where Zizek gave a talk, and the micro was always going in feedback, and he integrates that in his talk. It's a long time ago I saw this, but I should look again at it. But it makes me think of that also, that Zizek was able to integrate. They couldn't shut down the micro. It kept making this horrible sound, if you have a feedback mechanism.
We have 3 hands. Francis. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to just go back to the topic of COT and music, which originally prompted me to start looking into this. And it is that the autopoietic side of COT means that once you have an organization, there will be some structure that is kind of repeating itself, that is kind of reconstructing itself, like a metabolism. Some things are consumed and then they are produced again, and then they are consumed again. So in music, you would expect some kind of a repetitive pattern. But then to make it more interesting, I thought, suppose that we have this programmed COT system that generates notes depending on the previous notes, and then you add some notes as perturbations. Like say, you have a human musician who improvises things together with the system. So the system hears the notes produced by the human musician. Will the system be able to incorporate its notes in its organization, or will the organization be destroyed, or will the organization be turned into a different organization? These are the kind of problems we are looking at a theoretical level in our project, but these are also the kind of things you would like to hear in an actual concert of such a COT music generating system.
If I may, I would like to step back a little bit from this conversation and ask maybe a too simple question. to me, as an artist, I'm just thinking about different levels of translation that would be happening here. So you have the chemical organization theory that relies on physical processes that are then modeled. So you have this real domain of the chemical interactions. Then you have the abstracted domain of models, analysis of what's going on. So you have this abstraction level. And then you have the translation into sound. So we are assuming here that we move from real abstraction performance. But have we assumed that we could skip the modeling, or that we could move backwards and forwards in this process, rather than just assume that the mathematical abstraction of the process would be one-on-one translated to sound?
Well, actually, the way we see our model, it's not a translation from reality. That's to say, we do not start from actual chemical reactions. We are generating random reactions. That means it's, at this stage, a purely mathematical generative system. And then the idea was to translate it into sound. And then possibly the sound could be translated back into a mathematical system. For example, this example I gave with a human musician improvising together with a system, you record the performance and then you may add the notes generated in combination by musician and system back into the formalism, and you make a mathematical model out of it. So in this way, you could go in both directions. But at the level of actual chemistry, at this moment, we are not modeling them, though in a later stage, we would also try to look at some biochemical reactions that are known. So actually, that would be an interesting approach, that if you look at these biochemical reactions, translate them into mathematical formalism, and then translate the mathematical formalism into music, might be an interesting way to indeed translate a biochemical system into music.
Katharina, this is a very good question of yours. So what, if I get it right, you said the mathematical abstraction translating into sound, and this is the modeling, right?
Right.
Yeah. This is my basic question, where we have been 2 weeks ago when Thomas was presenting. So when we were talking about harmony systems and things like that. So I think this could be one approach, that you have this direct one-to-one translation from mathematical abstraction of an autopoietic system into direct sound. You can do this computer-wise with a program. This is one approach, which I find super interesting. The approach I am keen on, and I don't know if this works. This is what I tried to get across today with my presentation, is, can I get this abstract description of an autopoietic system? Can this be the basic for the performance of a group of people, and the outcome of the behavior is sound, but the sound is not in the center of it, but it's just an emission, but which is transparent. And if you hear the sound, you can tell. This is exactly what you said, Katharina, with this Merleau-Ponty quote. And you can tell by listening to the sound without, Francis, being repetitive in the way of minimal music or something like that. So that it's not this kind of pattern recognition, that it is but that you recognize certain patterns which are, let's say, more complex than repetition, steady repetition, that you can tell what is going on, and that this is actually an autopoietic system at work, and this autopoietic system is a group of people. This is interacting. This is, and I don't know if this approach does work, but this is what I'm keen on.
It's kind of like the system speaking back to you. Yeah, all right.
is what you're saying, I think what you're saying, which is a question I have too, that the kind of system that you're talking about involves having players, right? Like it could also having human beings with, say, like with instruments who are interacting in such a way with some rules, which these rules could be taken from a formalism, which could, let's say, hypothetically be taken from a biochemical system. But still, in order to make the system reactive, you have to have human beings who are interacting with each other. Because the problem still, the thing that I also haven't understood up to now is like, how do we get notes, like just pure musical notes? How would you get those to interact with each other? They don't seem to have, I mean, I know they can interfere and form chords and so on, but actually to have them to get them to have an interaction, like you know, in a biochemical system, then the shape of the molecules themselves has an importance. There's something physical going on which causes some molecules to interact with some other molecules and not others, which makes the whole organization happen. But you don't have that with sounds. There's not like a shape of a sound which permits it to interact with some sounds, but not with other sounds. So then the interaction will be governed not by the sounds themselves, but by a higher level of abstraction, which is this formalism, one, or by the human beings who are doing the sound making, in which case it's really more the human acting, and the sound is the kind of output of that interaction. That's partly what you're saying, right?
Yes.
So is it okay in this conversation that we're having, in this project that we're doing about how to apply chemical organization theory to music, is it okay to include the players, or are we only counting the sound itself? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think, no, exactly. So I think these are two approaches. The one approach is to focus on the sounds and the interrelation between sounds, and the way they are produced is not part of the modeling. It's just necessary to model, but it is not part of the model. Or you say the production of the sound is the system, and the outcome, the sound, is just an emission.
Yeah, it's like a computer monitor. Like the computer monitor isn't the CPU, but it's a way in which you can see what the CPU is doing.
Yes.
So
yes.
in that way, the CPU is the interaction between people, and the monitor in this case is the audio that comes out, right?
Yes. So see, this is the discussion in modern music, contemporary music. I would say it's this thing that John Cage said, let the sounds be themselves. So this would be the way which you can refer back to Bach, where we were talking the last time about it. So it's about the sound, and it's about the notes, and that certain notes, the combination of certain notes make certain harmonies that are nice, and other harmonies that are not nice. So you are on this abstract level. And the other thing is that you really say the production of the sound. This is the point, not the sounds themselves. And so my approach is more the second one. You know, it's like Gottfried Michael König, who did the electronic studio in Utrecht. So he is also more in this direction, you know.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, because you are also, well, no, there's two. I mean, with the Cage thing, he was also very busy with the role of the listener, right? Like that the listener needs to be there for the music to happen. So in that sense, he's really also dealing with, I guess, like second order cybernetic systems. So that, you know, in order to have this kind of real autopoiesis in this kind of system, you need to take the observer and the player also into account, right? So that's one point. But then you have this, and I think this is maybe we've already answered this question, but I think there's another clarification for me I wanted to try to get to. So in your talk, you said like one of your main questions was, are these kinds of generative systems are these kinds of generative systems the same as a self-organizing autopoietic system?
Yeah.
And I wanted to know if it was also, so we talked about sound versus players and the way that players can interact and perhaps sounds can't in the same way. But then is it also this, there's a second question for me, which is important, is about in this relationship, so using people or players, then which is a central question, is like, how do you organize a self-organizing system? Is that also what you're asking? Because in a sense, we're always creating an organization in order for this self-organization to happen. And it seems it's not irresolvable, but there's an apparent paradox there. And I was wondering if that was also what you were asking.
Yes. Yeah, because this is the it's yes, because, and it's also what Francis said a few minutes ago leads me to the same question you are asking now, which is not clear to me. What is understood at the moment at CLEA within this Templeton research project? What is understood under autopoietic system? And Francis, you did some, you gave some definition, and I need to know what the definition is that we want to model, because then maybe some things might not work. So maybe my approach might not work then. I'm not sure about this, you know, because this is exactly, Orion, what you say right now. How is this autopoietic system coming about? And of course, I say you have, if it is a bounded system, as I showed in my sketch, it comes from the outside, which is the written instruction, let's say, that organizes the system, and then it starts to run, you know. So as I said, is the generative system, these 4 points I show to you, is this an autopoietic system? Yes or no? Is one of the basic questions for me.
Well, I mean, this is the core advantage of COT, is that it gives a very simple definition of autopoiesis, and you can use it to find out whether your generative system is autopoietic. A generative system is more or less equivalent to what would be called a reaction system. A reaction system means a system of rules that says, if you have A and B, then you produce C and D. If you have D, then you produce F and E. If you have F and E, then you produce K, etc. So that's a generative system. So it generates new things, but it becomes autopoiesis when the things that are being generated at some moment are the same as the one that were there before. So the definition of autopoiesis in COT is very simple. The system should be closed. That means at a certain moment, it does not start generating anything that it hasn't generated before. And second, it's self-maintaining. That means everything that has been used up will reappear. So that means it is in some sense repetitive. But repetitive, there are two interpretations of COT. It could be deterministic. Deterministic means if you have A and B, then necessarily you generate C and D. But you could also have an indeterministic or stochastic version. That means if there is the rule that says A plus B gives C plus D, then maybe you apply this rule or you apply another rule. And that would allow you to generate a much wider variety of things. Like in music, it would be like not always the same notes are reproduced at the same moment, but sooner or later the same notes would come back. And that's another aspect of modeling it in a more stochastic way, where I think you could still feel the autopoiesis in the sense that things that have been generated at some stage will be regenerated at a later stage, while nothing really new will be generated. So there will be some kind of a closure in the sense that what's generated at some stage will have been generated at an earlier stage and it will come back at a later stage. So that is the autopoiesis or the self-organization. The self-organization is simply that the system of rules adapts to itself, so it becomes self-maintaining. And that's the essence of COT. It's, if you write it down mathematically, it's extremely simple. It's even pretty simple to explain, though I'm not sure that you will grasp it if I just explain it with words, but that's the beauty of it. It's so simple to define what is autopoiesis. Well, if you read Maturana and Varela about autopoiesis, almost nobody understands it.
And Francis, does in this conception of self-organization, does learning, is it included there? This is so that it is a more spiral. This was one of my questions. Is it a spiral movement, or is it a circular steady state movement from a certain point on?
Initially, it's a circle, but not a spiral. But what we are looking at in our project now is to extend that to the spiral in the sense that the system does reconstruct itself, but adds more, so it becomes richer, it becomes more complex in the process. So that's one of the things we are looking at, because we're looking at evolution. We're looking at evolution in particular of living systems. The origin of life, you must have had a quite simple cycle, but that cycle became more and more complex as it evolved. And as it evolved, it became fitter, more adaptive, surviving in longer stages. So that's the idea behind our project, to sketch this kind of evolution from simple, unstable, fragile organizations or autopoietic systems to more and more resilient ones. But in the definition of an organization in COT, there is nothing in there that says it has to grow. The definition just says it maintains itself.
But this is great. So this is really an important answer to my question. So that because I'm thinking in a spiral, that it is, because if you do it, if you do it the way, if you follow my approach, it is about, it's a spiral evolution. So it's not a steady state, because it's really, you learn while you are doing this improvisation, you learn, and then and then you change, and of course you can as I pointed out, and you can bring in constraints that certain things will be within a steady state, this for the modeling. So you have certain parts of it which are steady, and you have certain parts of it where will be a spiral movement.
Could I try to give an example and see whether Francis would agree with that? Suppose you have a blues pattern in improvisation. And then, of course, the same chords come back all the time, so they repeat themselves. Only a simple example. You can then make it much more complex. Of course, people can improvise on the blues, and every improvisation will perhaps be different. They're not exactly the same, but potentially all of these things could have repeated. So I think it's important to look to the potential. That's how I understood always the autopoiesis of Varela. You see, if you think of a human being, for example, you can do movements that perhaps you will never do, but potentially you can do them. One human being with one body will perhaps never do all the movements that you can do in life, but potentially you can move your hand in a way that you never moved it before. You see, so I think one needs to look to the potential of what can happen.
Well, that's exactly what I've been discussing today and the previous week with my collaborator Shima Begi, who is also a member of the Templeton project. That we want to see these organizations as they evolve to increase their potential. Their potential meaning their ability to deal with a wider range of conditions.
Yeah, so I think the structure of the potential should be closed off in an autopoietic system.
Yeah. Hello. Thomas is here.
Yeah, Thomas, we can hear you.
Is it extremely noisy? I'm in a public place. Well,
It is a bit, but it's okay.
it is a bit noisy. Okay, I'm reducing as much as possible the noise by Zoom. Okay, so Christian, thank you. I want to make a little comment because it's quite noisy here, but the idea of perturbations and novelty that we were discussing or that you were presenting, I think it's important to clarify that COT, the language of reaction networks, allows to make novelty operational. So I think that's the crucial point that we have been kind of passing through during this conversation. I've heard like I think that's a core point to keep into consideration. That yeah, it's a funny place here.
Talking about perturbation.
Yes, yeah, I'm in downtown Santiago, and the coffee place I was about to go is closed, so I had to be in the other one, which is not so academic, I would say. So
There's
yeah,
the big outside, Thomas.
yeah, there is a big outside, yeah, certainly. So the idea, the interesting notion is that you can make novelty operational. So you can tell exactly what your novelty is going to connect to. So then you can say, okay, so I'm gonna introduce some novelty, but you make operational in which form novelty comes in. So I think that's an important aspect of like a self-organizing dynamics, as Francis was explaining. So we have the reaction network, and then we have to specify a dynamical process in it. So we say how things get produced and consumed. So we need to have some sort of conservative law, which is what organizations will respect. So organizations are somehow emergent conservative structures. That's kind of like a simple way to say. So you have a list of changing things, and you have emergent conservative structures, which is like the same as autopoietic. But that's within your reality, within your system expressed as it is, closing up the outside, as we say, as modeling people. We have to do. We have to close the outside, so we have a system, so we have a model of it. But then we can incorporate novelty in an operational way, saying, okay, this is going to change that in this way. So I like very much your model, combining this, I don't know, Prolog or some like programming language for logical structures that can be combined with COT, because you can make classes of molecules. And then also, I know this rule-based system has constraints, so you can put more constraints than that was a very simple example, which lead to simple combinatorial explosion.
Exactly.
It doesn't give much. It's very syntactical.
To
how you express it, but you can put more semantics by introducing more relations. Like if this happens, then this does not happen, and then you can like introduce more structure.
Yes.
So then within your generative structure, assuming that it has a more interesting constraint, more let's say less, not so free, some more constraints, then this reaction network will be, you can analyze it and discover what are the organizations of this reaction network. So what are the subsystems that emerge as conservative within this rule-based system? But in your system, it's a very important aspect too. In your system, your example is impossible to be self-maintaining, because nothing that is consumed is produced by another reaction, because you put reactions of type man, interact, a conversation, and like something like animal or vegetable or something. So it's man, aspect, interaction. That creates a change of consciousness, but then the change of consciousness is not changing, it's not creating man, or it's not creating vegetables, or so the loop is not closed operationally speaking. So we must, like when we think of emergent conservative structures, we require that what it is consumed, what it is used up by some reactions, must be operationally as well created by some other reactions. So I think that in your narrative, that one way in which might be expressed something like in a common COT thinking is that we have a reaction network that is expressing how Adam and Eva interact before this perturbation, which is the interaction between the snake and Eva. So before that, they have a way of being in which being naked is a normal thing. It's not a problem. But then you introduce this perturbation. You change the reaction network by adding a new interaction, which is the snake and Eva having this conversation. So then Eva discovers that, and that cascade, creating more reactions. And then you get a new closed system where the fundamental, I don't remember, that the sin is already part of it. So we have a system where there is no sin before the snake, and we have some rules, but we need it to be self-maintaining as well. So we need to have that they, for having a COT model, I mean, for having like a proper COT model, there are many ways to do it. We can discuss that in more detail, but now I understand better. So yeah, but maybe we can. I would suggest to have a little session to expand this model a little further, so we make it completely consistent with the definitions, so we all understand the same. But these are the things, and I sent an email to explaining an idea that I had because it's so noisy. But now that I'm speaking, I'm just gonna go for it very quickly. I think there might be a way to model second order reasoning using COT. This is something for the first time while I was listening to you, I came up with this possibility.
Ah, great.
So it's really, I'm really happy to say this. I'm really happy because I thought about this for a long time and never came up with anything. And today I think I have a clue. So I will share it.
Great.
So when you, in very simple words, you have a reaction network, and you have what is known in the previous talk, it was called a process, which is expressing how reactions occur. So I have a reaction network, and I also set up how reactions occur. Physics give us something that is called mass action kinetics, which is the way in which particles interact in general. More reactions will happen if more molecules for its reaction are available. It's as simple as that. So you have also some chemical factors that make some reactions to happen more than others, but in principle, it's only about abundance. The more abundant some molecules are, the more those reactions that need those molecules will happen. That's mass action kinetics. That's the physical way to express how much a reaction occurs. But in general, it doesn't have to be that way. We can force it to be a certain way. We might want it to be that way, or we might invest for something to happen more. So the physics is not the only way to foster something to happen, I mean, in our setting. So the way that reactions happen in your system is called the process. And now different processes lead to different productive regimes, because if you trigger more one reaction than another, something will get consumed more and something will get consumed and produced more as well, because the reaction is exactly specifying that. And there are processes that are self-maintaining. So it's not that the network is self-maintaining. It's not that the reaction network is self-maintaining. It's the reaction network with a process being operated on it. So the process specifies what's going to happen, and there are self-maintaining processes, okay? And then the notion of process is very interesting because there might be many ways to be self-maintaining, not just one way, not just one process. You can follow the cycle in one way or in another way, let's say, so like clockwise or counterclockwise. So then that's the first step. And what it comes to be the second order part of it is that this multiplicity of potential processes that can happen, this multiplicity is sorry, 1 second. I need to, I must pay the bill. they come to me to pay. So it's very fun. So okay, we got the multiplicity of processes, and now what I think is that we might make a representation of the dynamics, a higher order representation of the dynamics, conceiving collections of processes that do something maybe similar to, maybe making it self-maintaining, for example. Collections of processes, now we think of them as new molecules. So the patterns, the behavioral patterns of the reaction network, we decide, okay, this is a behavioral pattern, and we make it to be now a new molecule. So we create a second order reaction network whose molecules, where its molecules are not molecules anymore, but they are patterns of reactions for the other ontological network. So we start with an ontology, and we model patterns as new entities. And combining patterns will be combined reactions, combined collections of reactions in the network. So then you can get a notion of what is the, like, how to explain it? It's a representation of the dynamics. Using the same language, you create a new representation of the dynamics, but it's subjective. I will have to elaborate more on the subjectivity aspect, but it is subjective because I choose these patterns to be my molecule, and these other patterns are this other molecule, and I will make a reaction between them. So I will put them together, and I will create a new dynamical pattern on my ontology. So you can start exploring perturbations in this new network, and those will be direct changes in your ontology. You see what I mean? So that will be like the act of creating this representation is subjective, so it is completely creative. Anybody can do a different one. So you have like a combinatorial explosion, like an exponential amount of possible representations of what do you call patterns of your system. So you make a choice, and then you can apply that. That's a way of reflecting about the process of second order. So representation of what it is to self-reflect about what is going on. So that's the core. I'm not sure if I'm being a little clear. I wrote an email to you. I sent an email as well. So the idea is kind of explained, but not sure if it's clear, the process. And well, I don't want to waste your time with this crazy idea any longer, but that's more or less the idea. Reactions, then processes, then collections of processes are new molecules, and you create a second order reaction network where molecules are processes in your ontological starting reaction network. So, yeah.
Thomas, thank you. This sounds. We really have to sort this out more deeply. But I think it's really great.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited about it and this talk. Really, really nice to continue with this.
Yeah.
I would like to ask Stan if he's here, wants to ask the question. Yeah.
Yeah. What?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I just had one question. I think it's really interesting what Thomas was saying, and also what Dirk and Francis was saying about the potential states, because I think we need to make like a connection to some, I think, to music as we know it. And I think the idea of potentiality and potential, I would call it potentiality structures, are really relevant to music, because music, if you would say so, it's like a play with potentialities, with musical expectations. I mean, harmonies, and if they are resolved or not, if they are dissolved, it's all a play of expectations. And I think that idea of potentiality structures is really something interesting. I don't know if it be possible to incorporate that into the second order idea of reaction networks, in that we would see those processes relating to potentiality structures somewhere. I think we need to find a way to just find a connection to music. I don't know if I'm clear, but I think there's something interesting there. And I'm sorry that I missed the first part of your talk, Christian. The second part was interesting.
Thank you.
You could say, Stan, that a tune, a song, for example, is only one of the many potential things that can be sung on a certain musical structure. And I think what our speaker does is make it much more broad. But there is an easy answer. If you make it too broad, of course, you automatically come in an autopoietic system, because the group of people, of course, if you allow everything to happen, well, per definition, otherwise the notion of autopoietic system would be wrong. That this group of people is an autopoietic system as living beings. So if you allow everything to happen, you have an autopoietic system per definition. Very complex one. It would be more interesting to have a more simple one, I think, to understand the connection with art and well, I don't know. Or simpler ones, medium complex ones, complexer ones.
Can I ask something? I wanted to also, I found that the connection to mythology also like super interesting in your talk. And we haven't really like picked up on that. And I wanted to come back to that idea and sort of ask, I guess it's just a very general question to begin. It's like, was it sort of just random that you picked this mythology, this Bible stories as a kind of, as an example of something? Or, because it's also intriguing, this kind of, I think you alluded to it at one point, but it's also very intriguing, this idea that, you know, that mythologies are kind of evolved systems between characters, that they've been passed on for generations, and these stories have evolved over a long period of time. And does that mean that our evolved systems therefore more likely to come to arrive at a like an autopoietic state? But there somehow is this autopoiesis within the mythology itself. And yeah, I don't know, is that what you're driving at? Is that your intuition that somehow these mythologies have evolved to be autopoietic, and therefore we might be able to, in a sense, analyze their constituent parts to find a kind of chemical organizational structure?
I didn't get really the question, Orion.
Yeah, this the mythology. I guess the structure is like, was the mythology just? I found the mythology super intriguing, and I wondered if it was intriguing for you for the same reason, which is that the idea that mythologies are evolved systems of interacting characters and stories, and therefore because they're evolved systems, evolved over millennia, they might have, like, evolved systems are more likely to become autopoietic systems because an autopoietic system enables them to survive. Like if a system can find this kind of circularity, this autopoiesis within it, it's more likely to survive somehow. So the story itself might have somehow evolved to take on these characteristics.
Yes.
I wondered if that was also your intrigue in mythology, that it has this evolved quality which might suggest that it has this kind of autopoiesis within the network of interactions with various characters, or if it was simply just a kind of interesting example, just a random example.
It's both. It's what you said first now, that it is itself, how did it evolve? We discussed this a lot within the seminar. You know, I mean, you can't tell, but you know, all these the whole structuralistic approach by Claude Lévi-Strauss or something like that. This was the initial thing for me, because I when I did study, I studied that, and studying fundamental theology. Of course, you are study the Bible texts, you know, and on different levels, and what do they tell you, and how can you look at them, and things like that. And I concentrated on origin myths. So it's not hero mythology or something like that. It's really just so you have all these different classes of mythological stories. You can classify them, but I have chosen origin myths because of the way because they describe processes of how a state becomes a state.
May I add? Just the same line of thought, I would actually say that the origin myths very simply imply autopoiesis, something appearing out of nothing. And to me, this negotiation between us talking about the autopoietic system or a sympoietic system, where is the boundary, what is the inside outside, is exactly this negotiation we need to do with the origin myths. So what do we take as the beginning point of observation?
Yeah.
No.
I also would like to add a little bit, Christian, to also follow in Orion and Christian and also Katarina. I think that these programming languages for creating what you say, the generative reaction network structure, can also have properties. You can, because you have objects in the you have a category which is man. I don't remember the other categories. There was man and interaction,
animals,
and also wisdom. Like wisdom was, well, you have like a extension and intention. So you have an intentional definition, which is a one word, and then extension, which are all the cases.
Yeah.
But also, you can have properties. So you can say wisdom makes you, I don't know, happier. Madness makes you even more happier or sad. Or one can define properties for this. So you have objects and you have properties,
yes,
and you can attribute properties to the objects in a very similar way to what Diederik Aerts has worked on in the COT systems. So that's another story, but just for him to pick up. Of course, I'm sure he already picked up what I was trying to say, but just want to mention in case. And this idea of having objects and properties together might be also a way to disentangle or make less trivial what's going on, because at this level you only had like categories and objects for this category,
yes,
and then reactions. But
yep,
the idea is to see whether a new reaction will create a new object that has some or a situation where certain properties were not possible before. Because shame, for example, maybe there was something like shame in paradise, right? But there was not shame of being naked, right? So this shame of being naked is the novelty of the scene or eating the apple in their little narrative. I don't even know that well, that story.
yeah,
But clearly that's the problem. So we can have the concept of shame, and we can have the concept of realizing someone is naked, but there is no connection to them. There is no like epistemic element that puts those two things as a connective, as an element. And we can make that with a new reaction, or as an like somehow that the model can do that. So I wanted to add that this is a very interesting also, a very interesting aspect to be explored within what we are discussing.
yes.
And there is some people in Germany developed something called formal concept analysis. I'm not sure if anybody here is aware of that. Formal concept analysis. No? Well, anyways, formal concept analysis. I can share the literature, because they define objects and properties, and then a simple way to define kind of structures that are coherent, that might not be trivial, that have objects and properties. Well, it's another interesting line, but I wanted to mention because I think it's quite relevant to this discussion.
Yes,
So
Thomas.
I will share that material too.
Yeah, great, Thomas. Thank you. Thanks a lot. This was exactly what you said now, that that there are objects and properties. This was my question to you and Francis a few weeks ago. If I can do this with COT, if this is allowed, you know, so taking a bit of predicate logic into COT, so that there are objects and properties of objects. You know, this is and it's great that you say that we should work on this more deeply or something like that, or that you see a possibility. This.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Jendreiko has developed a formalism for a very long time, and even connected to the structure of quantum physics. I mean, Jendreiko can tell us a long story about it. I'm sure. So yeah, I'm definitely going to share some of the material, like after this talk, maybe over the weekend.
Yeah, great.
So we can all explore that. Yeah, that's really, really nice, really interesting. Thank you.
I wanted to come back to this idea of autopoietic stories. The stories here that Christian has been working, there is no end to the story. But in a sense, what the end of the story is that from now on, humanity will have shame when naked. So the autopoietic thing is that you come to a condition, namely shame for nakedness, which is self-maintaining. And that is actually the approach that Marta Lenartowicz has been working on. Unfortunately, she's not here. She's also part of the project from the point of view of the sociologist Luhmann. So Luhmann describes a social system as a whole of conventions, you might say, that is self-maintaining via communication. Like, I say one thing which makes you do some other thing, which makes another person do another thing, etc. And the idea is that by these communications, at a certain moment, the whole system becomes autopoietic. It means that the conditions that lead to other conditions become themselves being produced. And that is what in a society you have conventions. That means norms, behaviors that people continuously reproduce, and they reproduce them because they are reacting to what others have done and what others before them have done, but the whole thing is reproducing. So the idea of Luhmann is that a social system is in that sense a self-reproducing system of conventions or norms. And what Marta is looking at is, can we express it in some kind of a narrative form using COT-like formulas, where you have these initial reactions where that leads to that, that leads to that. But then you see that if you put a lot of those together, the whole system becomes autopoietic. So I think implicit in the origin myth is that, for example, shame for nakedness becomes a self-maintaining property. And probably there would be a lot of other properties like that, that initially weren't there, but at a certain moment they just become part of the society, which means they are self-reproducing, self-maintaining.
Hello. I think a very interesting presentation. Thank you for the invitation to hear you. I only have one little question. Is what I'm missing here is the time lapse. From my point of view, life and autopoietic systems work in a time span. I'm much more oriented to chaos theory. So life happens in circumstances that are very specific in certain times, and also the first Eva is different than the second Eva after the snake. So the second Eva goes to talk with Adam, and then there's a third Eva that have changed all the way through the chain. So this person is changing all the way through the chain. So there's a feedback involved in the process.
I think we opened up a lot of questions in this session. And now we're exactly 2 hours. So maybe before we end this session now, maybe we can talk a little bit about what would the next one be, because we mentioned the formal concept analysis, or going a bit further into the modeling of the COT. So do you have ideas what the next seminar could be about?
Did you say, sorry, I missed the question. What did you say?
We opened a lot of questions, and there is some follow-ups we could do, such as thinking about time, or thinking about potentiality, thinking about the formulations of the COT, the model of it, or the formal concept analysis you just mentioned, Thomas. So which direction then, which next step to make? What do you think?
Yeah, I see. I will suggest we continue with the seminar cycle as it is proposed, and we like create this snowball of ideas. So I think it's yeah. I suppose we keep adding more and more, and we can 4 or 6 talks scheduled. Supposed to have a follow-up session for the modeling with Christian. But maybe we can organize that in parallel with the interested people, so we don't break this this session that is already organized for someone. 2 weeks, right? We have someone in 2 weeks coming. I don't remember who that person is. Maybe Vincenzo. Who's next? Do you remember, Katarina? We can check on the file.
I think it's Felix.
Right. It's Felix. Felix, you come next.
Yeah, and I don't think I have my presentation have nothing to do with it could relate, but it's a different thing. I'm just listening and learning from you guys. So I'm going to show what I do. It could help, but I'm not very sure. So I don't think this is relevant in the line of thought of Katerina. That's saying that this is going to be the next stage of the process.
Hi, this is Andy. Is it possible to speak?
Yes.
This topic was very interesting to me. When you speak of conceptual modeling, my specialization is a kind of human-centric functional modeling, which is a type of conceptual modeling. And I realized that I've been looking at a very similar problem to COT for quite a long while. So I'd be interested in collaborating on that modeling effort.
Yeah, I can reply to that. Thank you, Andy. I just shared. I shared some minutes ago. I'll share again a subscription web form that we did on Google Forms. So if you didn't have, I just put it again, so you can click on it and subscribe. So then all emails, everything we have, it's gonna go to that email list, plus some other emails we already have in our list. And for Felix, I think it will be nice to see your talk next. And even though now we are kind of like having momentum, research momentum, it's being created. But you have had a topoietic art experience, so I think it's extremely worth having a moment to maybe stop reflecting and maybe see some real concrete projects done around these lines. So in my opinion, I think it's completely good to have that, in my personal opinion.
Okay, no problem.
Oh, Natalie just posted that, in fact, the seminars have been scheduled. So the next one in 2 weeks, on the 5th of March, would be from Andy Williams. And then Felix is on the 12th of March. And on the 28th, Vincenzo. And yes, we will send out announcements for this.
Perfect.
Okay. Then I thank you, Christian, and I thank you all for a really nice conversation.
Yes, thank you all.
And I'm looking forward to the next one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the great talk.
Yes.
Have a good evening, all.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Yes.
Bye bye.